Welcome to the Best Places to Lead show. I am your host, Jerry McNamara, and I want to thank you for tuning in because we are on a mission to positively impact 5 million people. We're now going to do it over the next 4 years. It was a 5-year mission. We've already gotten 1 year down. The trajectory is good, up and to the right. Here's the point.
Nice.
I've never met anyone who showed up to work and said, you know what? I really want to suck at work today. And yet there are plenty of people that are ineffective in their role. And my experience is it's not their fault. It's our fault as the senior leaders when we don't create the clarity, the challenge, the comfort that they have the tools, time, and training to be successful, and the care for our people. Do we actually give a shit about them? And so that's really why we started this show, that we could learn from people like the guy that I have on today. Super entertaining, values aligned between the two of us. I love this guy.
Yep.
And so we're sharing the lessons learned of having led companies, been at the forefront, how we stumbled, how we fell, we got our teeth bashed in. Other people don't have to learn those same lessons. We'll give them to you, right? Free of charge. So,
this is free?
Free of charge. We're not getting paid for this one, Don, but it's super fun. So today we have Don Hennig, the co-founder of AccrueMe. And it's a company that provides growth capital to Amazon sellers. And you're doing it in a really untraditional way. I'm going to ask you about that because I'm a big believer of understanding the problem that you solve for people in the marketplace. Your career is so interesting. It's why I wanted to invite you to the show. I mean, from mortgage and financial services, heck, a soccer newspaper, and just like all these fun things. 3 reasons I brought Don onto the show. 1, because of this incredible background and the insights that he's had in building, growing, founding companies. 2nd, we both love dad jokes. I mean, Don, dad joke game is very strong. And the 3rd, when I talk about values alignment, my life goal is to have more fun than anyone else. And I think Don might be outdoing me. Don, are you ready to have some fun today?
I'm always having fun, man. This is going to be great. We're going to have a ball. And we're going to get into some interesting things. You mind if I touch base on something you just said?
Do it, please.
About if somebody is not doing it at work, they're not getting the job done. It's not their fault. It's our fault. Well, there was a story by Sun Tzu. So Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War in 300 BC. All right. So a little bit of ways. And it was a book that was founded by the Russians and it was interpreted by the Russians and it held away from the rest of the world for many, many, many years. They used it in their military training. And Sun Tzu tells the story. As a great general, great warrior, the king says to him one day, you're a great warrior, a great general, you've won all these battles, but can you lead a group of women? And he says, of course. And so they bring out all the women and Sun Tzu says, when I say turn right, you turn right. When I say turn left, you turn left. When I say about face, you turn around. And so he says, okay, let's try it. Turn right. And some of them turn right. Some of them turn left. They all giggle. He says, turn left. They're all turned around, this and that. He goes, all right, let's try it one more time. He explains it again. And same thing happens. Some do it, some don't. They were giggling and laughing. And he says, okay. And he calls for the king's favorite concubine, who's in the group, to have her head chopped off. And the king goes, oh, no, Sun Tzu, we know you're the greatest general of all time. Well, I believe you 100%. He said, no, you gave me a job. And he has her head chopped off. And now he says to the rest of them, let me see if you can understand. When I say turn right, you turn right. When I say turn left, you turn left, and so forth. Well, he says turn right. They all turn right. They left, they all turn left. And the point was he wasn't motivating them and getting his message across properly initially. This is 300 BC, so it's a little bit of a different time. I wouldn't suggest chopping people's head off or even yelling at people or any garbage like that. But, it's the leaders. It's if you're not talking the proper language that people can hear, it's useless. You've got to find a way.
I think you're right. And I think it's finding the place where you're using the language that your people understand, not your language. You have to communicate on your terms, not your terms. And I had a guest on maybe last year sometime, and Tom was talking about command and control atmospheres that we used to be able to have 20 years ago, Don.
Mm-hmm.
And now in today's environment, it's very different. I mean, the way in which we have to lead and lead through people and communicate and vision are all more accepted, what people accept. And that's what's more motivating in this environment. I've seen that in my career. I'm sure you have, because you're a little bit older than me. You've seen changes along the way. And
I have,
I think you
I,
have to
ha-
pay attention to that.
I have, Jerry, but I will tell you from the very first company that I started with my own theories in life and how to do it. And it turned out, and I didn't know it at the time, but there were books written about it called Total Quality Management. And anybody can look it up today, but it's basically the things we've already talked about previously about listening to your team, about getting real feedback, about getting people completely engaged in their job and in their work and feeling good about it, not a top-down mentality, but a team approach.
Absolutely.
And that goes back a long time. It works.
It does work. It's the same thing I've said. I've run 5 companies, 5 different industries. You have me beat. I mean, you're way more experienced than I am. And
It's pretty impressive.
as I look at it, I call it the 4 C's when you look at engagement for employees, right? Do they have clarity on how they win so they can feel good about the work that they're doing? Do they feel challenged by the work that they're doing? Because if they're not challenged, they're going to be bored. They can't go do their best work. They're going to go try and find something different. Are they comfortable? They have the tools, time, and training to be successful. Because
Right.
when we ask people to perform and we haven't done our part of the equation to execute,
Right.
then it's demotivating. And then the last piece is, the 4C, do you care about your people? And it's
Right.
one of the things that struck me about you, right? I think there's so many people that have like quote unquote open door policies, and people come and give feedback and then don't do anything with it. And you shared a story with me about the idea of how you can motivate and create change inside companies. Can you share that with me?
Sure. Well, I probably had 10 stories about it, but basically, like I said a little while ago, it's listening. And from the very first company I started, I had a suggestion box or a few suggestion boxes. And, I had maybe 60 or so employees at the time, and we were growing very fast. And with the suggestion box, what I did was I put one of those eraser boards up by our cafeteria in the office. And as the suggestions came in, they would be written down, who made the suggestion, what the suggestion was, number 1, number 2, and so forth. And at the end of the month, we would pick the best suggestion, and that person would get $100, which this is 35 years ago. $100 was meaningful. So the first month, and the suggestion that won, I didn't know what she meant, but it was a woman, Regina, in our closing department. And she said, can we have the lights in the parking lot stay on longer? So I went to her and I said, what do you mean by this? I don't really follow it. She said, well, Don, I like to work later. And when I go out into the parking lot, now that time has changed, it's dark and it's scary. If we can just have the lights stay on a little longer, I'd work later. And so would just about everybody else. I own the building. It was a brand new building. I literally walked like 10 feet away, went into the closet, and here's the timer. I changed it, and everybody wanted to work later. They weren't getting paid extra. They just wanted to get their job done. And so she clearly won, but I've done it. And then it's a great way to judge how well engaged your business is. If you start a suggestion box, and you can do it electronically and all of that now, but if you start one, and let's just say 1 month you get 10 suggestions. Well, if you don't get more suggestions the next month, you might have a problem. The engagement in your company is going down, not up. But as you get the suggestions and you're listening to the people and you're showing them all the suggestions and you're congratulating and you're giving rewards out to people that have done these suggestions, everybody's going to want to be involved. And they actually have the ability to change the company in many ways, small ways and huge ways. And when they believe they can change the company, that's when they believe that they own the company and they take ownership in every little piece. A customer calls with a complaint, they don't dismiss that complaint. They take it deep and they make sure that customer is going to be handled properly. And whatever the problem was, let's get it fixed. Not just, all right, fix this one problem and let's not fix the overall issue. No, they love the company now. So I've done the suggestion box, even in a company with thousands of employees, if you can imagine. So we built the technology to do it, broke it out into all the different groups, marketing, technology, whatever else. And I required the senior people in my executive team that were in charge of those areas to review every one of those suggestions at some point in time during the month. So we had them all organized. And my senior team was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. This is going to take forever. Look, too bad. This is too important. And from the very first day, we ended up with tremendous suggestions that we, as the management team, would never, ever, ever, ever have known. Just impossible for us to know because we're not doing that job.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic.
I think it's so important, Don. Right? People talk about leading is lonely. It's lonely when you try and concentrate power and hold on to things.
That's a good point.
I look at that and say, I give people explicit permission to tell me when you see something wrong in the business, raise your hand.
Yeah.
You know, Maria's on this call. She's my assistant. I mean, I drilled that into her in the first 6 months. Maria, 100% permission, 100% of the time to tell me when something's going wrong. Don't tell me after the fact.
Yeah.
And so when you create that culture of some psychological safety and you execute on it, it's way less lonely because people are looking out for each other. And I just think it's a great little tactical thing that, yes, it's simple. It's hard to execute, right? To actually do the work.
Yep.
But the output of it in the level of engagement is priceless. And
it's priceless.
It makes me think about, you've seen this over the course of your career. I've seen this over the course of my career, is I think we've gotten to a place of like a transactional world with social media. There's so much noise that I find. I don't know about your LinkedIn box. My LinkedIn box is getting hammered with just people connecting and making immediate offers, no relationship.
Yep.
It's crazy, right? And so they're trying to create revenue instead of relationships. And what I have found is if you do it right, the relationships drive the revenue. And I was talking with one of my clients that I work with, Amanda Holmes. She has in her community, they're working through the Ultimate Sales Machine and the Dream 100 and transformational relationships instead of transactional relationships.
Yeah.
So there was something that caught my attention on your LinkedIn profile. You have a longtime associate, John Lee, who is a partner in one of your businesses. Mm-hmm. And you specifically called out that business is all about relationships. And so for you, what's the secret to building long-lasting business relationships?
That's fascinating. I didn't even know I mentioned John or anything about relationships in there. I wrote it so long ago. Well, just an interesting little side note here. John was my boss in a previous company, a technology company that I ran sales and growth for the company. And he was the CEO and he was the founder. And we had raised tons of money and had built a sizable company. And we stayed in touch and we were friends and we became friends through the business and stayed friends after. And now maybe it's 10 years later, he says to me, he calls me and says, hey, I've got an idea for a business. And so I fly out to California, we sit down and we spend a day brainstorming a few different ideas. And he's an idea guy and he's an implementer. And we tried this and we tried that and we tried another one. And I was putting up money for these different businesses. And then we found one that really made sense. And we went down the path. And it's been, I don't know, maybe it's about 7 or 8 years now. And we've got a few different businesses going. And he's a good friend now for probably 15, 20 years. It's amazing. I go back to my very first company. I'm still in touch and still friends with people that were my employees from the very first company 35, 40 years ago, whatever it is. Amazing, right? But it's all about relationships. It's all about caring about people. And just as you would your friends, that's the way you should care about your employees.
I think you're 100% right. I was chuckling because I was making an introduction to a young executive to a woman that I dated in college. And I would still be in touch with her. Of course I would be. We were great friends. And just because we broke up doesn't mean anything else. But I just find that people just stay in that world of transaction instead of continuing to elevate each other and how we can do it better and better and better. So you have founded a ton of companies, right? And been involved in building them. So I was talking with a friend of mine recently, and she is a superstar. At least from my seat, her track record is impeccable. She wants to start a marketing firm, but she's stuck in the 9 to 5 grind of the day to day. And when I'm talking with her, she has a little bit of the imposter syndrome. Still has so much more to learn. And I was trying to get her to take action. If you were coaching her, Don, what is it that you would tell her to get out of her own way?
It's interesting. We all have the imposter syndrome. Here I am. I started this company in the e-commerce world to finance e-commerce sellers and Amazon sellers. I never did anything in e-commerce before. I didn't know even the lingo when I started this. But the next thing you know, I'm out there talking to people about what I'm offering. And they clearly know more than me about the industry. But I was not afraid of that. I just put it out there bluntly, teach me as we go. Whatever I don't know, feel free. But what I would say to her is a saying that I use in my entire career. And it's a very simple one. And you can take it both ways. Start stupid. Number one, you're never going to know enough. You just never will. And you just have to take that first step. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And things in motion continue in motion. If you take that one step, I'm going to tell you there's a 99% chance you're going to take a second step, and then a third and a fourth. And whether you like it or not, you're going to go down that path and you're going to figure it out, and you're going to run into obstacles, and you're going to figure out ways around those obstacles that in the beginning, you didn't even see those obstacles. So now you're learning the things that you needed to learn to go down this path. And also, as you're going down that path, you're not just going to see obstacles that you'll have to overcome, but you'll also see other opportunities. So you go down a path trying to start a marketing company, and you're learning, you get your first client, and you find out that all of a sudden, holy cow, do I really want to start a marketing company? What I really love is one part of it, whatever it might be. It might be social media advertising, social media video advertising, whatever it is. Oh my God, this gets my juices flowing. I love it, love it, love it. Well, why are you handling PPC advertising for all these other clients and doing the things that you're not great at and don't love? Do the thing that you love. And now you're going to build an agency, not around everything, but around this one thing that you never would have thought of, you never would have seen unless you went down the path. So I would ask her, what's the 1, 2, or 3 steps you can take to start down the path? And let's go.
Love that. I do think about the most successful people I know. They're willing to take action differently and
Immediately.
It's amazing to watch, and it's so uncanny. I see Matt Kleinrock joined us, who was on the show a number of weeks back. He is an action taker and a high energy guy, just like you, Don. But, he was in a place, you talk about opportunities. He shared with us about not taking ideal clients along the way and learning how to do his business better, and to now be in a place where, he finally feels in really good control of his business, and it's growing and it's profitable and he's having more fun than he ever has. But you're right. It's getting out of the inertia and into the action taking that people just get in their own way, and they write the story that hasn't happened instead of, well, I can continue in my role and not stop complaining, or I can take the action and bet on myself. Either is fine, but if you want to go do something, I think you only live once. You might as well take a crack at it.
I agree with you 100%. And I built a cartoon many years ago about your comfort zone. And we all do this. It's just inherent. We want to do this. We want to avoid pain. So you're going to go down this path of starting a new business, whatever it is. And all of a sudden you start going down, you're learning a little bit here and there. And I'm read a book now, and I'm reading this blog, and I'm watching that video. And now you have to take the step to do it, to actually start your business. Well, there's a lot of reasons why I don't want to do that now. It's going to cost me a little bit of money. I'm going to change my LinkedIn. If it doesn't work, it'll be embarrassing. There's a million reasons not to do it. And what do? You end up turning around and you end up staying in your comfort zone. So the way I have it is, you're on one side of the wall. In the middle is a brick wall. And that brick wall is fear. And on the other side of the brick wall is success. And you walk towards success, you run into the brick wall. And instead of figuring out how to get around that brick wall, walk around it, climb over it, whatever, get a ladder, you turn around 99% of the time and stay in your comfort zone.
Right.
You've got to be able to get out of your comfort zone. A great way to think about it is as a pendulum. So you know how a pendulum swings one way and the other way. Well, it's the same with business. It's the same with love. If you want to be very successful, is the high end of this pendulum on one side. Well, on the other side, the high end is risk. You have to be willing to take that risk. And it doesn't mean money necessarily. It could mean take that risk that you could fail and people will think poorly of you. They won't, but that's what will go through your mind. But if you want to get that real success, you've got to let that pendulum go all the way up from the left, all the way up to the right. And it's the same thing with love. If love is all the way up on the right and on the left, you've got to take the risk. You've got to go and do what you need to do. You've got to go and buy flowers for that person. Go out of your way. It's not a 50-50 relationship. It's 100 and 100. You've got to be willing to give 100% all the way up on that left side to get all the way up on the right side, which is real extreme love.
You know, as you say that, I'm just sitting here thinking about one of the things I see leaders struggle with all the time, which is accountability. And we want this accountable culture. So we have a highly accountable culture on one side of the pendulum. And then we have the worry of how people are going to perceive us. Oh, they're an asshole. They're this, they're that. But the reality of it is, right, when we're clear on what it is that we want to do and we want to build an accountable culture for high performance so that people feel great about the work that they're doing, then it's not about the fear and the worry on the other side. It's about creating the clarity for the accountability on the high side. Just like when you run a business, is there a risk? Yes, you might lose some money, but you also might have a really good, fruitful exit too.
That's true. So stay with that for a second. Talk about fear. As leaders, we could destroy our companies very easily by instilling fear in our team's minds. So if somebody takes a shot at something and it comes back and the customer's angry because Joe didn't handle it properly, well, what are we going to do? Yell at Joe, embarrass Joe in front of everybody? No, we're going to train Joe. If you yell at Joe and embarrass Joe, he'll never do the job. He'll never take that next step. As you know, I built mortgage companies and in addition to other companies. And in the mortgage companies I've built, I had some rules on the hiring. We would not hire anyone from a bank because they knew how to do one thing. They weren't allowed to step out. They weren't allowed to go over the top and take care of that customer. You know, I'm in this department. This is all I'm allowed to do. If you have a problem that doesn't affect my department, I've got to, tell you, here's a phone number, call so-and-so, in Texas. And that's not what I want. I want people that are going to go all out, find a way, make it right, no matter what. And then let's fix the company so that doesn't happen again. So we would hire some people from banks, but we knew that we had to instill in them, and not too many, but we would have to instill in them that they had the ability to change the company. They had the ability to go above and beyond. And if they didn't, that would be a negative. So
I think it's so good to give permission to people to break the rules, right? Laws are broken, but you got to break some rules. And I think one of the things that every job description that I've written since I've been 23, the last line says to do anything at any time to ensure the company's success, which means you have permission. It is part of your job.
That's right.
To make sure that the company succeeds. And so by any means necessary, and that's what we go do. And to your point, we fix the issue. All right, I have this irate customer in front of me. We're going to fix that issue. But it's irresponsible of us as leaders if we don't double back and solve the problem. Why did this happen? What's the underlying infrastructure? Right. What's the system breakdown or the process breakdown or whatever those things are, so that we can stay focused in on continuing to grow and build the business together, which that's how you do it. Because you're going to make mistakes along the way. And you got to tell people it's okay, because I don't know about you, but I've never built a world-class relationship yelling at someone.
No, absolutely not. I don't yell at anybody. But you just staying with that. I agree 100%. And I'm just going to mention on hiring. I mentioned that we really tried hard not to hire anybody from a bank. But what I also had some rules on things that were great. So people that we would hire 9 times out of 10, if I saw this on a resume, this is what I want. I want somebody who worked in the food industry, meaning that they were serving or cooking, or they were a waiter, waitress, busboy, something along those lines, because they work their asses off. They don't care about themselves. They care about the customer, and they care about all their teammates. So they're always preparing for the next shift, even though they're not going to be there. So they're restocking things. So the next people that come in that are going to take over are completely stocked and don't have to worry about it. They always have fun, and they work late and they work hard. So people from food service, I love single mothers or single parents. Their motivation is built in. Never, you can't go wrong with that. The other one I loved was athletes, people that played at a high level. They like to win, and they're going to find a way to win. And when you give them that permission to win, and that permission to change the company, and the permission to go beyond what the boundaries are to solve a problem, they will, without question. They'll love it.
We are so aligned because I loved food service and hospitality because service is built into the DNA, right?
Yep.
They are working commission because they're working on tips.
Absolutely. Yep.
Right. I always loved parents re-entering the workforce. There is a different level of motivation that comes there.
Totally.
And there's a lot of people that won't hire parents re-entering the workforce for whatever reason. And for me, I'm like, no, I know what it means to raise a child and to that's awesome to watch that happen.
I agree.
And the competitiveness of athletes, being a former athlete, my wife would say I'm a washed up athlete now, but I'm getting back out there. Maybe
never. You're still an athlete. Trust me, you're still an athlete.
Maybe
once
that's
an athlete, always an athlete.
Maybe that'll be my game. Let me ask you this, because I love what you're doing with your current business, AccrueMe, right? And I talk to a lot of businesses, whether I work with them or not. And I think the foundation for every great company, at least ones that I've run into and really analyzed, is that they understand the painful and important problem that they solved and who they solve it for. And I'm just struck that so many companies don't have that as a laser focus to say, okay, here's who I serve, here's the problem that I solve, and let's go.
Right.
AccrueMe solves a special problem, at least from my seat. It's a new emerging problem. Tell us about that, and I'll get the follow-up question, which will be, how did you come to the solution? Because I think it's interesting.
All right, we'll go in that order. So what AccrueMe does is we created a company to finance Amazon sellers in a totally unique way, something that's never been done before. So think about Shark Tank. And you go on Shark Tank and you say, I need money to grow my Amazon business. And what are they going to do? They're going to offer you, all right, you need 100,000. All right, we'll give you the 100,000. Mr. Wonderful is going to say, I want 12% or 16% per year, and I want $1 on every item you sell forever. And that's impossible. You just can't do it. It'll kill your business. And then Mark Cuban will say, all right, I'll give you the 100,000. I want 40% of the company, and I want 6% interest or something along those lines. And it's going to go around like that. Well, what we did is instead of lending money, we actually invest in the seller. We don't take any equity, so they own 100% of their company. Sounds odd right there. So by not lending, what we also do is we don't charge interest. There's zero interest. There are no fees, and we don't require monthly payments. They pay us when it's right for the business. Think about Amazon. These sellers are in October, and they can make a monthly payment to a lender for $20,000, or they can take that $20,000 and buy inventory that they're going to make 10, 15, 20% on in the next 30 to 60 days. Why should they take money out of their business and send it to a lender? It makes no sense. It makes sense to take that money and buy that inventory and make more money. So how do you do that? So we created it, and what we get is a percentage of profits for as long as they use our money. I'll give you the high level of that. On average, Amazon sellers earn 10% ROI per month, which is tremendous. So what do we get? Assuming a 10% ROI, the way it works, the way the math works, is the seller earns 100% of the profit on their money. So they're not risking anything. They're not taking money out of their pocket. Then they earn, take a guess, what percentage of the profit on our money? They earn 75% of the profit on our money.
Wow.
They can't lose. And then anything over that 10%, which is the average, they keep 100% of. And again, we don't own any equity in the company. We become a special member of their LLC, and only for as long as they use our money. And there's no term, so they could pay us back in 2 months or 2 years. And we have sellers that haven't paid us in 2 years. Our very first client 4 years ago literally just paid us off about 2 weeks ago. So over 4 years with us. And they were great, and they love us. And it was very interesting. We're out on Wall Street to these big hedge funds trying to raise money for this idea. And our very first client didn't make a payment until the 19th month. And the people on Wall Street were saying, will the sellers ever pay you? And we're saying, I think so. So here's the reason I say I think so, is that we put an incentive in there. The way that it works is we earn a percentage of profits based upon the percentage of capital we have in the business. So if they have $100,000 of capital, we give them $100,000 of capital. So we're 50-50. So whatever percentage of the capital, 100.5. So we get 25% of the profits. And the math I gave you before is exactly the way it works. But our 25% of the profits, when we're 50-50, is only applied to the first 5% of their ROI. So the first 5% of their profit, they keep everything else in a nutshell.
It's an amazing program.
It is amazing. It is amazing. And the way we got to it is a friend of mine wanted me to go into business with him on a bunch of different things. And I kept saying no, because I was retired. I took a break, and that break lasted 5 years. And when you're out for 5 years, you actually believe you're done. And, I started believing the news. I'm not working anymore. And everything was great, traveling all over, my wife and I with kids, the whole bit, having a great time. Well, then he told me, after about 6 months of pitching me on different businesses, he told me about Amazon and Amazon sellers. There are 2.5 million active Amazon sellers.
Wow.
And and the market's almost $400 billion just in the US. And it's all over the world, as we all know. Well, what do these people need? Who knows? So I called my accountants. I said, do you have any Amazon sellers? They're a large accounting firm in New York. They came back and they sent me 3 names. So I called each one of them. And one turned out this way. One was very small, had like $5,000 of inventory. Next one was medium size, like $100,000 or $200,000 of inventory. And the third one had millions of dollars of inventory. And I don't even understand the language. I'm just trying to learn, what's this all about? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it a scam? What's going on? And what do you need? So I finished up each question, each conversation with, so tell me, what do you need? And each one of them had the exact same answer. They said, we need better sources of capital. The sources of capital in this industry are terrible. The monthly payments are so high, you can't grow. The interest rates are so high, it's just horrible. So my partner and I sat down with that as a premise. All right, we need to figure out a way to give these people better source of capital. But let's talk about, sit on the side of the seller. What do we want as a seller? And we were literally sitting in the Penn Club in Manhattan having lunch. And I said, let's think of ourselves as sellers. What do we want? We don't want to, let's just dream. We don't want to pay interest. We don't want to pay any fees. All right, this is getting stupid already. And, truthfully, if you want to grow, we don't want monthly payments. All right, how are you going to do that? And so we came up with, what about getting a percentage of profits? And we just started playing it out. And that night I went home and I built a big spreadsheet, which I hadn't done in 7 years or 5 years. And it was like, oh, it was painful to go in and do that. And I called my partner afterward and said, this is not only good for us, it's great for the seller. The numbers are off the charts for the seller. It's like too good. And so that's when we said, yeah, this is a business we should try. And that's where we started. That's it.
Is it going well? Is it going as well as you thought?
No, it's not going as well as I thought. It's going okay, but reality is we have an objection that was very hard to overcome. And the objection is it sounds too good to be true. And, if you think about it, lending's been done for 2,000 years, and it's been done the same way. And the way that is, lots of little wrinkles to it, but the way that it is that the lender is completely protected and you, the borrower, are completely at risk. And we flipped that switch and we took on the risk as opposed to the borrower taking on the risk. They have all upside. So nobody's used to that. Everybody's used to getting screwed in. You get a lending agreement from somebody, a credit card. You're not going to read all of this, but you do know that they're all tied together. If you don't pay your Chase credit card on time, 1 month, your Citibank credit card goes up from 14% to 21 or 23 or 26%, and it can be up into the 30s in certain states. They all change. They don't send you a notice and saying, oh, by the way, in big letters, we're changing your interest rate from 14 to 28. No, it just happens automatically. You don't even know it. You get screwed every time.
But do you think that there's a tipping point where it's like, oh, there's enough critical mass that have used your platform and go, no, this is the real deal. I've got to think that at some point in time, it's like, because I'm listening to it and I think, man, I should probably open an Amazon store. This is incredible.
Totally agree with you. And I do agree with you. We are so on Amazon, all the sellers belong to one thing. It's called Amazon Seller Central. And that's where they get all their information. That's where they communicate with Amazon. That's where Amazon communicates with them and could shut them down and all that. There's a lot of things. The money flows through Seller Central. Everything is in Seller Central.
Yep.
And the sellers get to rate different service providers. And as far as capital providers go, we are ranked number 1. We have all 5-star ratings, where a lot of our bigger competitors have either no ratings or very bad. And why do they have none when they're so much larger? 100 times larger, because they figured out something in the system where it prevents people from putting in a review. They don't want the reviews. We want the reviews. So I do think there's a tipping point. And I think really what's going to change it for us is we're going to go into other markets. So right now we're just United States focused. We're opening up Canada and Mexico. Both markets, we've talked to hundreds of sellers in both markets, and they love it. They just love it because they don't have the availability of capital as sellers in the United States do. Right. The capital providers in the United States, they don't always tell the truth. I'll just put it that way.
Hard to imagine.
Yeah. And when we get over to India and Germany and Poland and other places, the capital sources are not there. So we see the ones that people tell us about all the time, and they're truthfully really, really bad. And when I talk to sellers over there, they go, Don, they all want to represent us in these countries. Can I be your representative in this country? These are successful sellers that know everybody, and they're willing to pay for all the advertising, all the marketing out of their own pocket. They just want to be a part of this company. Well, so I think that's where we'll kill it.
I think it's super fun, and having run a couple high growth businesses, cash is king and growth is expensive. Like everyone thinks, oh, it's so cool to grow. Yeah, and you're buying desk and increasing your office space and buying trucks, and you're doing all of these things, and you're constantly reinvesting your profits back into the company to take the next shot at the roulette wheel. That lucky number black, let's go. And
you're not paying yourself along the way,
right?
In most cases.
It's the nature of entrepreneurship for sure.
Yep.
Super interesting business model. I think that's a great example of, hey, we have this problem. What's a unique way that we can solve it?
Right.
And I look at this. I really believe that curiosity always wins. It's the last ring of the business acceleration model. I believe in learning businesses because when you have a curious business, we innovate and solve problems differently. So
Right.
I was out in Denver this week doing a strategic plan. I took a handful of people to lunch yesterday. We were talking about, you know, things that we're learning in this business environment, certainly an uncertain business landscape right now. What are you learning in this business environment? Anything in particular that you pull out?
I think I haven't thought about that necessarily, but what I would say is that it's constantly changing. Like right now, we're all trying to learn the AI models and better prompts and such. We're testing it this way and that way and the next way. And if we don't do that in a very short period of time, like if you're not testing Chat GPT and the others, and there are others that are better at writing and all of that, there are different reasons to use different ones. If you're not doing that, it's almost like, go back to when laptops came out. It would be like not playing the game with the most current technology. Excuse me. Like it would be like, I have my pad and my pen, and I'm going to write my letter, and I'm going to give it to my receptionist or secretary who's going to type it out for me on a typewriter, as opposed to having a laptop or a computer and doing everything, the way you should be doing it. You have all the tools right in front of you. So, and it's changing just constantly. I'm just using that as the example, but there's a million things that are changing. And I'm finding that the entrepreneurs of today in the Amazon and the e-commerce space are really knowledgeable. And what's very interesting about it is it's a very confusing market. So there are so many what's termed agencies, thousands of them. And these agencies, you want to become an Amazon seller, and you start reading the terms of service from Amazon, and you start going down the path, and here's how I set up my account, and you'll be overwhelmed. You're going to be like, oh my God, I'll never be able to learn these 10,000 things. But lo and behold, there are all these agencies that for a fee, for this piece, this piece, this piece, and this piece, you pay for that, they'll do it all for you, or they'll do the pieces that you don't not comfortable with.
Right.
And so the agencies are making killings. Not all the sellers are making a killing. There's a small percentage that are making a killing. The agencies are all killing it. So, I don't know if that answers your question necessarily, but I think it's just really, it's the same kind of thing, staying up on everything. And if you're not staying up on AI right now, you're going to be behind in a very short period of time.
I can't agree more with you. I mean, technology is the greatest accelerator of business. And if you are not thinking about and paying attention to and leveraging or testing, then you're falling behind, because other people can start using computers to do things that you're hiring humans to do, and they're going to have a better cost basis to do that. And you'll lose that game over time. And so you have to be thinking about it. I know the CEOs that I work with, it is a hot topic of how do we integrate Chat GPT and AI and machine learning into our business. We know we have to do it, but how the heck do I do it while I'm operating my business? I think it's almost like the wild, wild west back when I had my internet company, host.com boom. And, I used to call them the alphabet soup calls, the SEO, the PPC, SEM, and, we'll get you rich in the wild frontier. And they all made money, but, the sellers on AdWords didn't always do it. And so you have to be conscious of that progress. Well, and I might know this answer, but it's one of the standard questions that I do ask people is, as you look at the course of your career, what's something that you had to learn to be an effective executive and leader that you didn't know you were going to have to learn?
I don't know if you know how to be an executive or to be a leader, but I'll tell you, one of the best lessons I learned is I was working in a bank, because I learned that banks paid 80% of your college education as long as you got a B or better. So I made sure I got a job at a bank, and I made sure that they were paying my college education. And then I'm working, so I have enough money to pay the rest of my college education. And just interesting, I didn't need loans or anything, but they came out with this thing called student loans, and they're cheap as could be. So I borrowed $5,000. I didn't need the money, but I invested in the stock market. And I used that money while I was in college to buy my first house. It's just like, these are the opportunities that come your way. But I didn't know that, a lot of things about managing. I didn't know that you had to make the difficult call. I would say the probably the number one thing that I learned through it all was I had to be tough sometimes. And I changed a saying in my company many years ago, and I put up signs all over the company, and it was, "Do not accept mediocrity." And I literally went to bed one night and I thought of my company, and I thought of all these people in my company that were mediocre. And I realized I was working till 10 o'clock or later every night, and I was working weekends. I'm like, wait a minute. Maybe the reason is not that I'm just working and working and working, but maybe it's that my team overall is mediocre. So I literally cleaned house and fired everybody that was mediocre. And, you would think the company would go down substantially. The next month we did more business and it was smoother than ever. And I didn't have to work as hard. And we rebuilt the company, and we all got together and we all agreed we will only hire excellent people, the best. And when we make a mistake, we will cut them out quickly. And I had to learn that hard lesson. It was very hard. Like, how do you fire someone? I'm a nice guy. I didn't like doing that. It's not in my nature. So I had to have in my head that I had to fire this person to protect my team.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more important than protecting my team. They have to go, and it's going to be better for them. And it's definitely going to be better for us, meaning our team. But I had to protect my team. And when I started doing that, my team reacted in a very, very, very positive way. And they have always, in all different companies, have always reacted extremely positively because they know I have their back. Once we hire somebody and they're wrong, I call it they're a cancer. We're going to cut the cancer out right away. End of story. Somebody said to me once, one of my managers, "Well, Don, HR says that, we have to give them, 30-day notice and then a 60-day this." And I said, no. They get fired right now. "Well, what about HR?" I said, "This is why we have lawyers. I'm not worried about it. Fire them right now, protect your team. Otherwise, you have to go." End of story.
I think it's one of the things that struck me. I interviewed Lindsay Johnson, I think in October of last year, and she said the greatest gift that you can give everyone else in your company is the opportunity to work with exceptional people.
It's the truth.
It was so true, and reminded me, when I was talking to her, I interviewed Matt Foxall very early in the show, and he walked into an organization that he basically had to clear house, and he termed it was like going from traditional farming to organic farming. All the shortcuts and things that people were doing, no, we're going to build an awesome culture. We're going to make the right decisions by our people. But it takes time to get to be certified as an organic farm. And that was the culture he built of bringing tens in. He called them tens.
Yep.
And, he transformed that organization from being, the last in his entire organization to being the fourth best division inside the entire company out of 40. And went 40, 10, 4. And, it was because he was willing to make those hard choices. And I think there's, you talk about that pendulum and accountability, and we want to have great cultures and performance and execution. Like, that's the piece that we own. We get to invite the people on the mission. It's something I remind leaders of. When they're complaining about someone, I tell them, you're the person that invited them on the mission. If they're not working out, it's your responsibility to say, this isn't working. Let's find you another mission that floats your boat and gets you excited. And let me try and use my network to get you to those.
Exactly.
Because that's what good, compassionate leadership looks like.
I agree. It's not negative, it's positive. So I'm going to give you a quick story just for the fun of it. So, some of the leaders that may listen to this don't own their own company. They work at a company, but they're a leader. And I'll give you an example. I joined a company, a mortgage company, publicly held. There were maybe 600 employees at the time, and got a great offer. Everything was great. Well, after being there for a few days, I said to my wife, "I don't think I can do this." She goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "The culture of this company is so horrendous. Nobody talks to each other. Nobody says anything. Like, you walk down the hallway and everybody just puts their heads down. it's a fear-based mentality, and they're all deathly afraid of lifting their head because it could get chopped off. And so my wife said to me, I'll never forget it, right before bed, she said, your personality is contagious. Change it. Like, she liked the money I was bringing in. I'm like, how am I going to change a 600-person company that's on all over the country? How are you going to do that? So the next day, I decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change it from myself. So the guy bringing the mail around, Carlos, I said, hey, Carlos, again, he's like, oh, a little uncomfortable. He's got to talk to one of the bosses now, and I was in the executive suite, this and that. Hello, Carlos, tell me about yourself. And he tells me a little about himself. Next thing you know, he starts to sing a little bit. He's got a beautiful voice, and he starts singing the national anthem, and like, wow. And then he walks away, and now we became friends. And then I start walking down to go get a cup of coffee, and all these desks in the accounting department, I just stopped at the first one and I said, hi, I'm Don. Who are you? What do you do? And they're like, oh my God, somebody's talking to me. They didn't know what to do. Anyway, this just kept going. And I just kept, putting myself into position of saying hello and talking to people. Well, about a week later, the chairman of the company and myself were walking down to get a cup of coffee. And it was like Norm walking into Cheers, if you remember. Yeah. Everybody's going, Don, hey, Don, hey, Don. And he's looking at me like, what's going on? And I go, oh, just people, whatever, So I changed it from myself. It made work fun because I had a bunch of relationships across the board, nationwide, as it turned out. And as we built this company to over 6,000 people, the culture that I built stayed. And that became the culture. Nobody looked to the chairman for the culture. He's not that guy. They all looked to me for that culture. And my divisions, the company, I'll never forget, we earned $308 million net profit after taxes this one year. My divisions earned $312 million after taxes. So the rest of the company lost $4 million. And, but the culture was of everybody chipping in, of listening and implementing. So it was very, very critical. And this was a saying that I used in that company completely across the board: listen and implement. And it must be in that order. If you try to implement this great idea you have, stop, listen to your people, get them bought in. If they don't buy into it, if they don't like it, if they want to change it, let them change it, and then implement it. Listen and implement. And that's how we built that company to it. And we went from good to really great.
Amazing. I always say, like, people are always noticing other people.
Mm-hmm.
And let's start with us first.
Right.
How am I showing up? Am I a leader worth following? Yeah. And answer that question first before you start asking questions about the people that are around you. I think that's
well. I'm going to stay with that for a second, if you don't mind. If you want to be a leader worth following, you have to know who your people are. You have to know when they're getting married, when they're having kids. If it's a small company, you have to know who their kids are, what their names are, boys, girls, whatever. In my company, like, we had at one point like 2,600 people just in my groups, and I took pride in knowing everybody. Now, I'm sure I didn't know everybody, but we would bring them all to Vegas, all the salespeople, all the sales assistants, and it was about 1,800 people. And at one point, we were having this big session, and we're going to take a break so everybody can return calls and emails and whatever. And everybody's going to rush to the doors. And I'm there, and this girl in front of me closes the doors. Now, everybody wants to get out. She closes the doors. She turns her name tag around and says, everybody says you know everybody. Who am I? And I'm looking at her and I go, I honestly don't know. And I said, turn your name tag around. She turns it around and I go, oh, we just hired you up in Bellevue, Washington. You came from Chase. You're doing 30 some odd million a year, and your name and blah, blah, blah. I told her whatever else about her. She goes, oh my God. I go, exactly. I know who you are. Now open the door. But it's important. It's important that you care enough to know who the people are.
Amen. I think it is super critical. This has been amazing. I want to finish with one last question. And It
An
comes
easy one now, Jerry, an easy one.
it comes from the guy that connected us, John Cavendish, who is the
Oh, okay.
CEO of Seller Candy. He was in here in March with all the CEOs that
He's
I
a great guy.
fantastic guys. John, thanks for connecting Don and I. So one of the questions that he asked was, what's the difference between being an entrepreneur and the CEO or the president? What is that difference in your mind?
In my mind, an entrepreneur is extremely creative and always with eyes open, looking at how to not just improve your company, but possibly improve your company by creating something new to go on, to bolt onto your company, or to change your company completely. Where, a lot of times the founder or the CEO, this is my company and this is what it's going to be. It's going to go down this path. The entrepreneur always has their eyes and their head on a swivel. I'm looking for that next opportunity.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that what I'm doing at Accrumi, as great as it may be, doesn't mean that's where it's going to end. And you have to go in and stay open in every company because there are other opportunities all around you. You just have to look at them and find them. And those other opportunities might be better than what you're doing today. So I don't know. That's my quick thought. Entrepreneurs are always looking, always creative, and the CEOs are running a business and more focused, I would say.
I love that answer. I think it's one of the best ones that we've gotten because
Hey, look,
it's the nature of what is the balance between chasing this shiny object as the entrepreneur and staying disciplined and focused.
That's right.
I think the entrepreneurs, their role is to inject risk into the organization.
Mm-hmm.
CEO is to take risk out of the organization. We're going to stay disciplined and focused. We're going to go down this lane. And
I like that.
I think it's a fun question to answer because you've been on both sides of the equation in doing that. I think it's super fun. Don, super great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. If people want to learn more about you and what you're doing, what's the best way for us to connect with you?
And thank you, Jerry. This has been great and it went fast. So, the best way to reach me really is with LinkedIn. So it's my full name. It's Donald Henig, Henig. And you'll get to see all the different companies that I started in all the different industries. Most people stay in one industry. I just tended not to do that just because no good reason, just did it. And, got excited, learned about something and went down that path, and certainly not pigeonholed into one thing. And, so you'll see all of that. And the one thing I will tell you is if you reach out to me, I do communicate. So a lot of people I find on LinkedIn, you send them a message and you never hear. Well, if you send me a message and say that you are on Proven Chaos website podcast with Jerry, we're going to have a conversation, no question about it. And I look forward to it. And even if you're not starting something today or you're just thinking about it and you just need some advice, feel free. That's what, this world is all about helping each other. So if I can help, I will.
We're always better together. And that's why I appreciate you coming on to share
that
and experiences. As I always say, if I've had my teeth bashed in, you don't have to get them bashed in. Right. I'll just tell you all about it. So super fun. Okay. So one of the things that I'm not good at, Don, is people for help. And so I'm on this mission to positively impact 5 million people now over the next 4 years. And so if you're listening, I would love for you to share our podcast. Find someone that a leader that listened to Don and said, wow, there's some really great golden nuggets that we should take away and share. If you're seeing this on social media, like, comment, reshare it so that we can spread the message because we are better together. And the whole point is, who wants to show up at work and hate what they're doing, right? Let's help each other create compelling companies because compelling companies, they always outperform. And that's really the mission that we're on. So I do need your help in doing that. And now listen, next week we have another CEO. So we have Tyler Horsley. He's the founder and CEO of Nuclear Networking. They're an Inc. 500 company. I'm going to talk about the joys and pain of scaling a business because he has some really interesting stories about when it goes really good and the frustrations that you want to pull your hair out as you're doing that. And I certainly can relate to him having grown a franchise 500 and then an Inc. 500 company. It's not always easy from the inside. Sometimes it looks easy. I promise you it is not easy. So I'm looking forward to that next week. And Don, again, thanks for having us. Great episode. Really appreciate it. Maria, good to see you.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks so much.